Welcome, folks. I am Jabby Kaway, joined by ACHARA KIRK.
What's up?
And we're looking at House of the Dragon, Episode 2, full breakdown, and Game of Thrones Easter eggs from Emergency Awesome. Thank you, Emergency Awesome, for allowing us to react to this. Very, very much appreciate it. Y'all, if you haven't already, please do me a big favor. Hit that subscribe button, bell icon, all notifications, and pretty please vote this up. Let YouTube know you're enjoying what you're watching. I want to say real quick, something that might be a bit controversial.
Right at the top of the video?
Yeah, I realized, and I think a comment in our reaction helped me to realize as well, for whatever reason, in episode 2, I connected emotionally in a way that I actually haven't connected with any of the Game of Thrones episodes. Because Game of Thrones is interesting, and there's like crazy stuff going on, and it's got compelling drama, but I didn't connect emotionally with things happening in the show, and I think that was part of my issue in general with Game of Thrones, why I couldn't feel the same level of enthusiasm that everyone else did. And for the first time, I'm like, whoa, I'm actually like feeling something here. I don't know, maybe it's just age. Or I need to watch Game of Thrones again, who knows? I'm sure someone in the comments is gonna be like, no, I remember when Jon Snow this, and you know, Daenerys that, I felt so much emotion. I'm like, I certainly felt emotion when they were blowing apart season 8. Anyway.
Welcome back, everyone. This will be my full House of the Dragon episode 2 video. There's a whole bunch of Easter eggs and references, so we'll break it all down. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the episodes. I'm doing videos for all the episodes just like I did for the main series, and we're doing a giveaway for HBO Max subscriptions. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber and just post your favorite moment from the episode on the video. Careful for spoilers if you haven't seen the episode yet. We'll just start at the beginning and work our way through shot by shot, talking about Easter eggs and WTF moments. Starting with the brand new title scene. So probably one of the biggest surprises, biggest WTF moments was the cool intro scene that they did. Like, it looks almost like the original series with the miniature, obviously meant to look very different for this series, but they used the exact same Game of Thrones theme music. I'm so surprised that they actually didn't switch up the actual theme song. I'm also wondering now if they're going to change this new intro each episode based on the events of the episodes, just like they did in the original series. Like in each Game of Thrones episode, they would change the map that they focused on just based on where you went in each episode. But the other major difference in this intro, if you couldn't tell, is that it's meant to be a metaphorical and literal Targaryen family tree. Like, it's meant to show the Targaryens literally and metaphorically being the blood of old Valyria. That's why it's blood flowing down from the ancient Valyrian freehold. The actual model is of the ancient Valyrian freehold itself. It's the same model that you see King Viserys building in his bedchambers here. The reason why it's black is because of the black rock that it was built from inside the mouth of a volcano. That's why Dragonstone is black too. Like, it looked kind of like the same rock that Dragonstone was made of. That'll remind you of all the dragon glass that's on Dragonstone that would have also been in the ancient Valyrian freehold, which is critical for fighting White Walkers in the Night King. A little bit of a backdoor Song of Ice and Fire Long Night reference there too. But you see the blood flowing through all the different symbols. It's meant to show the bloodline of their family, and all the different symbols represent the different members of their household down to present day, ending in Rhaenyra's symbol. There's other people represented in the family tree here because they marry into the family and become part of their bloodline, or they're like the Valerians, and they are also the blood of ancient Valyria, so they're represented in the map too. Like, you see some of the symbols like way off in the background, and some of them are in the forefront. The ones in the forefront were all the Targaryens. So starting with the path at the top and the symbols, this is what they all mean. It starts with the symbol of the Doom of Valyria, like you see the actual freehold symbol itself as the blood flows up. That's meant to represent the Doom itself, like the volcano literally erupting and destroying ancient Valyria. Technically, it was the 14 flames, 14 volcanoes all in a chain right next to each other, all going off simultaneously. Suddenly, it seems like a bad idea to build your freehold inside the mouth of a volcano.
Maybe,
but then the next path is the picture here. It shows Aegon's conquest, the War of Conquest in the background. Then it shows Aegon the Conqueror's crown after the conquest. Next, it has two symbols, and they're for Visenya and Rhaenys, Aegon's sister wives. Then I believe the next one was Aenys. He was one of the next kings after Aegon. Like, it shows the path of kings in the Targaryen family. Then the next one are Jaehaerys and his wife Allison Targaryen. And you notice how the blood flows out of the symbols? That's meant to represent them both being Targaryens in their blood commingling, like them sister wiving. And the reason why there are all these paths of blood that split out from them are because they had many, many children. The next ones, I believe, are for Balon and Alyssa Targaryen, two of his children. Balon was Viserys' father. Then because we move to Balon's children, you see Daemon's line split off. On the other side, you see Viserys' symbol, and then his first wife, Aemma Arryn. You see how the blood sort of connects her sigil, House Arryn's sigil, to the Targaryen sigil, because she was a Targaryen through her mother's side, so she was also part of the family already. In the background, I believe this is meant to be for Rhaenys, the queen who never was, and Corliss Valerion. She's metaphorically kind of removed from the action after Viserys is named king during the Great Council. So I think literally on the map here, that's why they put her symbol way in the background. Then when the path turns into a raging river, it's meant to signify the proliferation of Targaryens. Like, there are many, many of them on both the Targaryen side and the Valerian side, all the blood of ancient Valyria. And the last big symbol here you should recognize is Rhaenyra's Valyrian necklace that was given to her by Daemon. The symbol on the wall above here is just meant to represent the Dance of the Dragons War. Then as it zooms out on the entire model, you just see a metaphorical and literal representation of how their family tree is the blood of ancient Valyria. It's a very cool way to depict a family tree. Obviously with the design behind the title being similar but a little bit different from the astrolabe that they used for the original title. The astrolabe in the original Game of Thrones intro scene is the one that you see in the Maester's Citadel. This time the symbol that they end on is the Targaryen household symbol, but it's in the mouth of a volcano. The reason why it's a volcano, though, is because, as Viserys explains to Allison, the ancient Valyrian freehold was built inside the mouth of a volcano in the 14 Flames so that they could be closest to the source of the dragon's power, because dragons lived in that area naturally.
Right.
They crave warmth. Living there was necessary for them to hatch their young. You also notice the Inaugrion that he talks about, where the blood mages practiced their dark arts and created dragon bonding just in general, probably used blood magic to literally bond the blood of dragons to the higher-born Valyrian dragon lords, was the inspiration for the Targaryens when they built Dragonstone. Like, Dragonstone is meant to be a replica of the ancient Valyrian freehold in the Inaugrion here. There are a lot of theories about what happened in ancient Valyria and why Targaryens, the other dragon lords in particular, are bonded to dragons, but not the lesser houses of the freehold like the Valerians.
Right.
The title of the episode is The Rogue Prince, which is what the realm calls Daemon Targaryen because he's metaphorically the rogue prince, like he's not really good about following the rules. As you see in this episode where he literally steals a dragon egg to try and create some attention for himself. The Rogue Prince is also the title of one of the short stories that makes up the book Fire and Blood, the history of the Targaryen family.
What?
But the
I
actual
need that
opening
book.
scene is of Crabfeeder and his army in the Stepstones, paying off that scene where Corliss Valerion explains why he's called Crabfeeder. His real name is Kragus Drahar, but he ties up his victims in low tide and literally feeds them to the crabs when the high tide comes in. Like you see all these crabs crawling around here eating people. We get a real quick shot of Crabfeeder at the end of the episode. He's the one with the horribly burnt face in the mask. You saw him in the trailer a couple times too.
When I saw this shot of the crab feeder, all I could think about was, this is just your existence. All day, every day, you're this dude. Just like, gross. This is how you wake up. This is how you go to bed. This is how you interact with people. Grody Melody. All day, every day, 24/7.
Maybe some stuff happened to him and he's just trying to make the best out of a bad situation. It's like, all right, I'm horribly disfigured. How do I work this to my advantage?
Right. Life gives you ice, you make ice cream. I get it.
Yes.
Because during the reveal on his face, they're intercutting Corliss talking about the second sons, the idea of being the lesser members of great dynasties and families. Not only is that meant to be an Easter egg for the second sons, the mercenary company in Essos in Game of Thrones later in the timeline.
The second sons, they're the group of mercenaries in the Game of Thrones. I can't believe that didn't click. I'm like, yes, of course, the second sons. But I really like this concept. The eldest sons in the kingdom will inherit, right? Whatever it is. Second sons are screwed. Normally, second sons become knights or something. You have to find your fortune a different way. And it's interesting in this show how the second sons, being Corliss and Daemon, are extremely ambitious. Perhaps being the second sons forges that kind of ambition because it's not just handed to you. You have to make it for yourself.
Now I'm also kind of wondering if Crabfeeder is secretly a member of the Targaryen family, like a Targaryen bastard, or just somebody who was way lower in the line of succession and was either exiled or just forgotten about or just cast off.
That would
in
be
A Song of Ice
cool.
and Fire, too, a lot of the mercenary companies in the East, like the Golden Company later in the timeline, they didn't get created till after the Blackfire Rebellions, but a lot of these mercenary companies were comprised of Westerosi bastards and exiled nobles, so the same could
Makes
be true
sense.
for Crabfeeder.
If Crabfeeder is a Targaryen,
That's a theory.
that would make him just like Smeagol in a way, because Smeagol was one of the hobbits before becoming Smeagol. Because I know that George R.R. Martin really loves Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't surprise me if that was like a slight inspiration.
Sure.
But when they pick back up in the small council meeting, we find out it's been a year since the end of episode 1. So that gives you an idea for how quickly they're jumping through the timeline. There'll be bigger time jumps in later episodes, though.
Wow.
They're talking about replacing the former Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, Ryan Redwine. He was this old guy in episode 1 you saw standing around in the background. They say that he just died after a long illness after the events of episode 1. And Harold Westerling, played by Graham McTavish here, is just taking over as the new Lord's commander, but they have to replace the empty position on the Kingsguard because there needs to be 7 for the 7 different kingdoms, which Rhaenyra winds up filling with Kristen Cole. Even though she has a crush on him, she is right when she says that he is the only member of the group here who has actual combat experience.
Also
but
nice
you do
to
notice
look
when
at.
they're selecting the next member of the Kingsguard, you do see a lot of members of houses that we didn't see during the main show. Like, there are many lesser houses in A Song of Ice and Fire. Most of the time on Game of Thrones, you really only meet the great houses. So because this is a totally different show, they try to feature other houses as much as possible, but also during this period of the timeline, a lot of different houses were also much more active and central to the story than were during the events of Game of Thrones. You notice the shot of them pouring the wine into the cup. That's also meant to be a metaphor for the Targaryen bloodline, because one of the main topics of the episode is Viserys remarrying and having more heirs, along with Daemon Targaryen separately talking about having more heirs himself. Corliss Valerion scene here just meant to set up his alliance that he forms with Daemon at the end of the episode, because the king won't take any action and seems like he doesn't care that much about what's happening to Corliss or the potential threat to his business. Even though he is meant to be a weak king, Paddy Considine says that Viserys feels like this great weight coming out of Jaehaerys' reign, because so much of Jaehaerys' reign was this time of prosperity for the realm. He's trying to keep the good times rolling, so to speak, as much as possible, like avoid conflict as much as possible. But like later in the episode where Corliss talks to him about this metaphor of steering into or going around a storm, never waiting for it, that's also meant to show you how Viserys' inaction, like his inability to make hard choices, helps lead to the events of the Dance of the Dragons. Like him not heeding Corliss's advice is really bad and eventually causes this giant Targaryen civil war. Rhaenyra getting thrown under the bus by the small council is just meant to dovetail with the conversation that she then has with Rhaenys later when she's like, how do you think it's going to be? I mean, get real with yourself. There's no way they're going to let you be queen. Trying to tell her that the realm isn't going to take her seriously, no matter what she does. So when she takes matters into her own hands later in the episode and goes after Daemon and the Dragon Egg on her own, like pulling an Arya kind of, that's just meant to show you more context for the way that she reacts to this kind of situation. Like, she's not going to take things lying down. She doesn't want to be another queen who never was. She's meant to be a little bit more like Daemon. Even Viserys says that, like, oh, you remind me of my brother when we were much younger. I've forgotten about it. But she's not quite as chaotic as Daemon. Like, she doesn't want to stir the pot quite as much on purpose the way that he does.
That's an interesting comparison. They're both people of action. And the thing that I like about Rhaenyra is that she is that girl who wants to fly into battle. It's not unheard of for a Targaryen woman. We had Daenerys, and I forget the names of the two sister wives of the first king. One of them, she absolutely loved to do that, and they were very active in fights and stuff.
There is a lot of tension brewing between Corliss Valerion and Otto Hightower. Now, he doesn't hate Corliss, but he also doesn't really care about him that much, other than just expecting him to do whatever the king asks of him. Like, you're useful only as long as you have your navy. That's all we really care about. We don't really care about your business. And because of what happens later in the episode, too, with the succession, with the king marrying Allison Hightower instead of his daughter Lena, that just meant to show you more of why he'd have a grudge against House Hightower in general. When they say Daemon seized Dragonstone in the past year, that's pretty much what happened in the books. He was ordered by the king to go back to Runestone and the Vale and be with his wife Rhea Royce and just be quiet. But he said hell no to that. He took some of the gold cloaks because he was the commander of the City Watch. Like, he trained them as his dogs of war, basically. And the reason why the king hasn't really done anything about it, like they say that the crown has been quiet about it for the past half year, is because as Daemon's brother, Viserys knows exactly what's going on. Like, oh, he just wants attention. He's just trying to create a bunch of noise. He's not actually going to do anything really crazy. Which you later find out is actually kind of true. Like, that was actually a pretty good call on Viserys' part, just to ignore him.
Right.
You notice when the Dragon Keeper comes to give Daemon's message to the king, he speaks exclusively in High Valyrian because, as a Dragon Keeper, like, their lives are entirely dedicated to raising and tending the dragons, so they wouldn't speak in anything but High Valyrian, because that's the language that the dragons understand. So they explain Daemon stole a dragon egg and intended to give it to his bastard that Mysaria was pregnant with. He intended to marry her, per the customs of ancient Valyria, take a second wife so that the son would not be born a bastard. But like after he gives the dragon egg back and Mysaria gets really pissed off at him, she's like, what, you announced we were going to get married? As if she didn't know that they were planning on getting married. Like, what? And she tells him she would never want to have a child. Like, I'm never going to threaten myself with childbirth. So basically Daemon was lying about most of that stuff and doing a lot of this just for attention. You also notice the scene where Rhaenyra comes to bargain with him and get the dragon egg back without the show of force. When they're talking to each other in High Valyrian, she just like, oh, you've come and taken my home because I'm the princess of Dragonstone. I'm the heir. The heir is always named the prince or princess of Dragonstone. So technically, Dragonstone does belong to her.
Oh, I see.
And he kind of jokes about eventually getting married and having heirs. That's just meant to foreshadow a lot of their growing relationship. Like, there's this weird chemistry between them, but they're not in an actual relationship right now. So
they're gonna be?
Dialogue is meant to be loaded and foreshadow the future of what will happen between the two of them. Love the scene of Viserys explaining ancient Valyria to Allison, the freehold here, the model. It was built to be a perfect replica, so like all the buildings and sizes are appropriate, along with the scale model of Balerion the Black Dread perched on one of the buildings. That's how big he was compared to the rest of the buildings in the ancient Valyrian freehold. So when he's talking about Balerion being like the last remaining living thing to have memories from before the doom of Valyria, Balerion wasn't the only dragon that Aenar Targaryen took with the family when they moved to Dragonstone to escape the doom, but he's the only dragon from Valyria that survived after the move. So both Vhagar and Meraxes, Aegon's sister wives' dragons, were born on Dragonstone after the move. And now in present day, Vhagar is the oldest and biggest living dragon, as they explained during the episode. I'll talk about Vhagar in a second too, because like a big part of the episode is dedicated to talking about Vhagar specifically. The reason why Viserys is so particular about Balerion the Black Dread himself is because he was his final rider, but he only rode him once before Balerion died of natural causes around the age of 200.
Wow.
Dragons don't really have a size limit, so the older they get, the bigger they get, which is why Vhagar, the oldest, is also the biggest dragon. It's also why they joke that Vhagar is too big to actually nest inside the dragon pit, which is why they're allowing her to roam free. We see her a little bit in the trailers like this is Vhagar. We get a quick history lesson on the culture of ancient Valyria and how their hierarchy worked. Inside the Freehold, the capital was inside one of the actual 14 Flames volcanoes. Turns out, bad call, like I said, putting your capital in an active volcano. There was no one king ruling everyone in ancient Valyria. It was just a group of the Dragon Lords all sitting on a council together. The Dragon Lords were the great houses, the ones who did all the dragon bonding, so they were the ones that owned all the dragons. But as Corliss Valerion explains, there were also lesser families in ancient Valyria who were not bonded to dragons, didn't carry the gene. That's why they have the white hair, but the only members in his family who can ride dragons are the ones who are born of mixed marriages with Targaryens. Like Rhaenys is a Targaryen, she married Corliss Valerion, so their daughters and sons can ride dragons. As Viserys says, at its height, the Valyrian Freehold had thousands of dragons. And the other cool thing is that Corliss Valerion reveals that the Valerians is actually an older house than the Targaryens, even though they weren't dragon riders. But because they didn't have dragons, they turned to sea trade to earn their money. And the Valerians actually came to Westeros and Driftmark long before the Targaryens came to Dragonstone. Maybe at some point we'll get another prequel series set in ancient Valyria. That would be pretty cool.
That would be awesome.
I've already talked a little bit about the Onagrion here and my theory about how the Blood Mages in Valyria created the practice of dragon bonding by using their magic to literally bond the Dragon Lord's DNA with the dragons themselves. So that when new dragons were born, they would sense the other Dragon Lord families as one of their own. You get a couple quick moments here with Allison and Viserys just to let you know what their relationship has kind of turned into in the past year. You also kind of sense what's going on with her father in the background too. Like, he definitely knows at this point what he's doing because there's all these conversations that he has with him later about, what do you think about me getting married to Lena Valerian? And he's like, you know, you should think about that a little bit. And then later he tells his daughter, oh, by the way, you're going to go see him tonight, aren't you? You have to imagine that he's doing that with her all the time. Like, oh, by the way, you're going to go see him again, aren't you? Again and again and again.
Yeah, I mean, her nails are all jacked up from like the constant anxiety of having to deal with that. What was interesting to me, and I guess it makes sense with the king's character, he couldn't see that he was being played at all.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing that I find so fascinating about Otto Hightower. In that moment when I was watching him during the episode, I was like, well, yeah, you know, he is making good points. And then later on, I was like, oh, he's so good because he's so manipulative because he makes it sound like he cares.
Like he's genuine.
Like he's genuine.
Yeah.
Like, oh, as a friend, like, oh, it must be so tough to be king, you know, because you have to make those hard decisions, knowing full well that he's planted this seed.
And speaking of Viserys' current condition, how can we not talk about all the maggots? Like, clearly, he is getting worse and worse and worse. Like, the last time we saw him, he had a wound on his back that wouldn't heal. Didn't seem that big, but seemed like an ill portent of things to come. Now he's starting to lose some of the digits on his hand, so if it's this bad now, you wonder how bad he's going to be in a couple more years after another couple of time jumps. I've always thought of him as like the Sean Bean, Ned Stark type of character during the series. Like, really good person, but someone who just destined to meet an untimely end.
That's what I said.
Yeah. No, he totally is, because as we know from Game of Thrones, good people don't survive.
I mean, they do, but you have to have edge.
You gotta have edge. You can't just be a nice person in Westeros.
We visit the Great Sept for the first time on the show, and the figure that they're praying to here is the Maiden. Because of the big betrayal at the end of the episode between Rhaenyra and Alicent, a lot of you have asked if they were actually in a relationship. Like, are they in love, or what's going on between the two of them? I think it's possible that they maybe had a little something on the DL together, but obviously at the end of this episode, that's all over. Like, there's a big rift between the two of them now because she treats it like a big betrayal, and the way she looks at her father, she also takes it as a big betrayal from him as well. Just kind of showing you the growing rift between those two women, between the Blacks and the Greens, as they eventually spin up into the Dance of the Dragons way later in the timeline.
That's a different actress.
Yes, right.
We're doing time jumps.
We're doing time jumps. The actress that we have right now is playing young Rhaenyra. Soon we're going to get like the proper Rhaenyra, which is going to be this actress.
For some reason, okay, I'm glad you told me that, because I was sort of expecting that young actress to age up over the course of several years, just like Daenerys.
Emilia Clarke.
Like, how did they go from being best of friends to being bitter enemies? This is like the next step on that slippery slope. Then we see Driftmark for the first time ever, I think. I don't think they featured it during the Game of Thrones series. Their main castle here is called High Tide. We see a little bit of the interior at the end of the episode, but we'll probably see more of it in later episodes. I loved all Rhaenys Targaryen scenes here, her speaking so frankly to both Viserys and Rhaenyra. She tries to get real with both of them because Viserys is kind of ineffectual and unwilling to make decisions. So she's like, you need to continue the line of the Targaryens. The dynasty can't end with you. You also have to remember that Viserys is only supposed to be about 36 years old when this is happening, when he remarries to Allison. Even though Paddy Considine is in his late 40s, looks way older.
Yeah.
You have to imagine life expectancy during that period wasn't that long.
Someone got on me in the comments about that, and I kind of replied jokingly about it. He's like, back then, people only lived to 35. And I was like, back then when they were dragons, ha.
That is a good point. But even still, though, as a 36-year-old man getting with a 12-year-old girl, that's it's still young. I think even by those standards, she's still young.
Well, that's why I was making the comparison of like Joseph and Mary. I mean, that's a biblical thing. It's weird now.
It was a different time. You matured a lot quicker.
Just the conditioning of today, it makes it look gross.
So technically, he'd be considered an older man. But like, for example, Alicent Hightower is in her mid-20s when she remarries to him, so there's only about 9 or 10 years between the two of them. Then even though this idea of the marriage between the two of them doesn't go anywhere, Lena Valerian herself is a big character in the story, at least in this early part of the story. There'll be a couple time jumps during the series. We'll meet an older version of her character and the dragon that she winds up riding. I'll wait to talk about that till we actually see it happen in some of the episodes. We'll probably get that in either episode 3 or episode 4. I don't know how many it'll be. But for example, there's a reason why she spent that entire conversation with him talking about Vhagar. And I think one of the important scenes during this that tells you how some of the book information about these events is actually misconstrued by the Maesters is this whole event that takes place at Dragonstone. The way they wrote it in the books, they make it sound like it actually was true, like Mysaria was pregnant with his bastard and eventually miscarried. So if you read the books, what happens on the show is a little bit different, but what happens on the show, based on what George R. R. Martin is telling us, is the more truer version of events than what's written down in the books because of the way the Maesters wrote everything down based on second and third hand accounts of the events that happened during this period.
But George R. R. Martin, you wrote them. Like, what? You're like, so I made this story, right?
Yeah.
But actually the Maesters wrote it. I mean, I get it. In the world, the Maesters wrote it. But actually, what I really wanted to happen was this much more interesting thing where she's pissed off.
Yeah.
Because she's like, I can't believe that you lied and now there's a target on my back. Good job.
So everyone across history has always wondered what is the most correct version of that story. That's basically what they're aiming to do with the House of the Dragon episodes throughout the whole Dance of the Dragons, throughout the entire series. So that's why on the show, it seems like Daemon was lying about having a bastard and just doing this all for attention. Like he even threw the dragon egg back at Rhaenyra like it was no big deal. So they'll probably do something similar with future WTF events where like the people who chronicled the books, like the Maesters who wrote the books, got history wrong. Viserys says that he plans on marrying Alicent soon in the spring. That's probably going to be like the next episode if we jumped an entire year in the past episode. And then obviously they end the episode with Corliss Valerion taking matters into his own hands, forming the alliance with Daemon to destroy Crabfeeder and the Triarchy's army, starting what will be the War of the Stepstones. Wow. That sounds like it's going to be either 1 or 2 episodes, and they'll start in episode 3 next week.
Wow.
The actual war lasted for several years, but they might just compress that because of all the time jumps in these first couple of episodes. And like I said, his conversation with Daemon at the end about second sons and seizing glory for themselves and showing you Crabfeeder's face just makes it sound like Crabfeeder is more closely related to some of these people than we believe. Like he's secretly a member of the family distantly too.
I really enjoyed that breakdown because there was so much there. Because obviously with Game of Thrones and with Westeros and the world building that George R. R. Martin has done with this entire series, there's so much backstory and so many connections to people and events that we've heard in passing in this show and in Game of Thrones. So it was really cool to have someone much more knowledgeable than myself make those connections and remind me like, oh yeah, this is how this person is connected to this and this series of events. What I love is just the fact that it could go any way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It would be very interesting if Crabfeeder had a connection with the Targaryens and
Gollum.
I'm not super convinced about this Gollum theory, but sure, I'll let you have it. Yeah.
He looks all screwed up, and Gollum got all screwed up. I mean, because of his obsessions. So
yeah, I mean, I don't know if he became screwed up because of his obsessions, but yeah, it would be interesting to find out more.
Or like he's like the reject soldier from 300. I don't know.
Oh yeah.
For me, obviously, like I'm way more noob than KIRK over here. I haven't read any of the books except for like 30% of book 1 from Game of Thrones. Some of it goes over my head because there's just so much data. Like that's the thing with world building and these kinds of stories.
Yeah.
There's just so much, and it's hard to just take in all at once. I do still enjoy the exploration of it. It's almost like, this is a weird analogy, but like back in the day I had a 3-monitor gaming PC, right? And the side monitors were there just to immerse me. You're
Yeah.
not really supposed to pay attention to it. And so that's how the data feels sometimes. It's like, oh, it's like all this stuff. But you're sort of focusing on this central point, and all this
Yeah.
other stuff just sort of helps wrap you up in this world.
For me, what I really enjoy is just the sense that it feels like real history, even though it's fantasy.
Because it's so detailed.
It's so detailed.
Yeah.
And I really like that, even though, a lot of the time I don't remember all of the connections or all of the families. But it's fun to delve deep into it and see how the story is going to continue growing.
That was fun. Hopefully you guys enjoyed some of that. Thanks so much for hanging out. And do subscribe, bell icon, all notifications, vote this up. I'm Jabby Kuwait. This is
ACHARA KIRK.
Peace out.